Now we will take a moment to introduce you to our speakers. Our speakers today are Corrine Conley and Cheryl Cooch. Corrine is a principal on Raymond's Human Resource Solutions team. She is people-focused, providing leadership, management, and strategic input on broad HR initiatives, which cultivate positive and result-driven work cultures. Cheryl is a senior consultant on Raymond's Human Resource Solutions team. She helps clients measure and understand their current state of employee engagement and identify and prioritize high-impact actions to produce the greatest organizational change. Cheryl, you may begin the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Darren, so much. I'm so excited to be here. Welcome to the session today. We are so excited to be conducting this webinar today on such an important and very timely topic. But first, we want to thank everyone for joining us today, because if you're joining us today, that means that you're likely interested in making your workplace an even better place to work. So thank you so much, really, for your commitment to the overall well-being of your organization and your workforce. Today, my friend Corrine and I are going to share some essentials and best practices for succession planning. We're eager to provide you with a simple framework that you can start using today that can easily be integrated with your current resources and processes. And guess what? We want you to come along on the journey with us as we walk through the process in real time. So get your pens and paper out and be ready to participate in this maybe unique and interactive webinar. And today's webinar will focus on succession planning scenarios and challenges, mainly in the public sector. However, the concepts and process is pretty universal and can easily be applied to any organization, public or private. So are you ready to get started? Well, let's go. Corrine, can you get us started with a poll?
Sure, absolutely. As Cheryl said, it's going to be an interactive webinar. And today we're really looking to find out first, where are you in the process of succession planning? Do you currently have a succession plan in place? Have you thought about it? Do you not have a plan at all? We'd ask you to select which of the following comments best supports your current state. And it'll give us an idea of where you are today and maybe where we can help take you in the future. It doesn't matter whether or not you have a plan in place or not. Today, you will learn something in this session. So we're glad to have you here. And don't worry, you will learn tools and techniques today that will help move you forward. I don't see any of the, I'm waiting to see the responses.
Well, you know, Corrine, whether people have plans in place or not, I think in today's webinar, there's going to be something for everyone, for sure. Is there something else we might want to learn from our participants today?
Absolutely. I like to know where things are and what people have to say. So keeping that in mind, one more piece of information we'd really like to know is, what is the biggest challenge that people are facing in succession planning? It could be a number of things. Is it process? Is it people? Is it time? No challenge is really too insignificant. It's a barrier, obviously, of getting started or completing them. So we'd like to know through this poll, really, what is it that is most impactful for you? What is the challenge that you're facing most?
Corrine, and I hear a lot from folks that things like time and resources, are big impacts, as well as leadership and management support sometimes in organizations can be a challenge, and maybe rightly so. Organizations are facing unprecedented challenges today that can greatly affect their succession planning process. Let's take a look at some of those factors. Is everybody ready for a quiz? You probably are. Get your pencils and pens out. Let's do a quiz. So what I'd like you to do is I'm going to be asking you how aware you are of current workplace factors that might be influencing your succession planning efforts. So if you could get out a piece of paper or a scrap piece of paper you might have handy. And what I'd like you to do is number 1 to 5, just down the left side, just in a row there. We're going to walk through each question here one by one. We're going to be starting with question 1. And I'm going to be asking you to jot down what you think the answer is. Now, since these are percentages, your answer is going to be likely somewhere between 0 and 100. And you might want to leave a little bit of room after you write your answer in such an event that your answer isn't correct. So you can have room to put the incorrect answer. Well, maybe for some of you, the space won't be needed at all. So are we ready to get started? So question number 1, what percentage of public sector leaders consider workforce succession planning very important? So jot down, I'm going to give you 5 seconds for each one. Jot down a number you think it is, 0 to 100%. 5 seconds. If you said 37%, you would be correct. Wow, what a number. That means, I like to round things sometimes. That means about 40% of our public sector leaders think succession planning is very important. Question number 2, what percentage of public sector leaders believe the largest wave of retirements is yet to come? Yet to come. Hasn't happened yet, but yet to come. Go ahead and jot down a number that you think it is between 0 and 100%. I'll give you 5 seconds to do so. Let's see how close you are. If you answered 54%, you're also correct. So over half of our public sector leaders say we haven't even experienced yet the number of retirements that are coming. Question number 3, what percentage of public sector organizations do have formal succession planning processes in place? Again, your number is 0 to 100%. What do you got? Give you 5 seconds. So how many do? How many actually have plans in place? You might be surprised. I certainly was surprised. If you put 12, you were correct. Now that's a pretty low number. So look at what these data tell us here. So about 40% say it's important. 50% say we haven't even yet had all the retirements we're going to have, and only 12 of us are prepared for that. So if succession planning if this doesn't convince you maybe that succession planning is important, I'm not sure maybe what will. Let's look at a couple of other data points about our workforce at large. So number 4, what percentage of the workforce is currently watching postings or actively looking for other work? 0 to 100%. Go ahead, 5 seconds, jot down a number. A lot of you might know this. I've seen this published in a lot of current publications and articles recently. If you said 51%, you're correct. So about half of our workforce are currently looking at postings, or well, how I like to say sometimes, they take the call, right, from the recruiter if they called. That's half. There's an opportunity there as well. Number 5, what percentage of employees would stay with their current employer if given an opportunity, maybe for succession planning, right, an opportunity to move up? Again, we're looking at 0 to 100%. What percentage of employees would stay? Give me 5 seconds there. If you answered 29, you are correct. So think about it this way. You got about half of your workforce that potentially ready to turn over, maybe you're thinking about turning over. You can save 30% of them, maybe, simply by looking at things like succession planning and development. Kareen, what do you think about these numbers?
I think this paints a real picture when it comes to succession planning for sure. You have 54% of the leaders thinking that there will be an increase in retirements coming up, and that's really supported by the fact that there were delayed retirements during the pandemic, and we will likely see significant retirements in the next couple of years. With that, it says we're not quite prepared for those retirements, right? We have 12% of the organizations that are ready to, that actually have plans in place. So this is a significant opportunity to make a real difference in organizations that aren't prepared yet. You can really see how important it is. And certainly we know that we are challenged with retaining people in organizations. That struggle is really real. So, oops. So the next thing we're going to talk about as we move forward is let's really get into succession planning. What is succession planning? I think if we start with the first definition, we're all on the same page, so we understand that we're headed in the same direction, right? The process of identifying and preparing employees to fill key roles in the organization when somebody leaves. So each of us probably have people in the organization that we'd say, wow, if they left, ooh, we'd be in trouble. This is the process where we take and identify those people who really, those positions that we are worried about, right? And identifying and preparing employees to be prepared for the future, right? Succession planning is an ongoing process. It's not stagnant in time. It is something that will evolve. As you know, people move throughout the organization, and maybe they take a different career path. Maybe they have opportunities that um, um, present themselves earlier than they might have anticipated, and you have to pivot. So even if you've put something in place, if you have a plan, it's not something that can stay stagnant.
Absolutely, Karina. And I love that you use the word ongoing process as you were describing what succession planning is. Sometimes I talk to folks about succession planning, and they often describe it as sort of as a one-time or a point-in-time activity used for maybe one role in the organization, maybe for the top leader, oftentimes CEO or other types of top leaders. And it really isn't. It's for any role, any critical role, especially when employees leave. You got to be ready for them. And it need not be complicated at all. I know when sometimes people think of this as complex. The framework for succession planning is actually pretty simple. Let's take a look at this simple 4-step process of succession planning. A lot of folks think of it as being complex. Succession planning is hard, it's complex, it requires a lot of elaborate tools and technologies and such. And yeah, there are lots of these tools that you can incorporate into your succession planning, tools, techniques, systems even. I've seen a lot of electronic things. The 9-box analysis tool is a great example. A lot of folks use that. I'd encourage you to look that up if that was something that you had interest in. And yes, you can surely incorporate these tools into the process for sure. And the great thing about this process, this simple process, is it allows you to incorporate what you already have. Tools, processes, techniques, people that you already have to meet your succession planning needs. So let's take a look at how simple succession planning can be. First, this 4-step process, we're starting at the left. First, you have to identify critical roles and positions. These are the roles that if the current incumbent left would be devastating for your organization, especially if they left without any notice. 2, we identify successors for that. Who's the right person that could take over if such an turnover occurred? 3, you create plans to prepare that individual that you've selected, and 4, you implement the plan. It seems pretty simple for sure. Is this about the same in the public sector, Karine?
It certainly is. I think one of the things that maybe not unique to the public sector is in this whole process is who owns it? Is it the city manager? Is it the superintendent? Is it the CEO of a nonprofit? Is it the HR, or is it a team of people that own it? I think that people, part of the challenges in getting started is, one, who's going to own it, and how do you put it on a plate that's already overflowing? The constant challenge that people are faced with, certainly in getting started. And I think by making it simple and breaking it down into 4 easy steps, it at least takes that fear out of it being so monumental that it's unimaginable to get it completed. So I think this is a great framework. It works for both public and private sector, but certainly, the challenges of who owns it and who's going to drive it is something to be aware of.
Absolutely. Are we ready to start practicing? Do we want to walk through this process together? I think you do, right? So get your pen and paper handy. Let's start walking through the process. So what we're going to do is we're going to simply introduce. We only have so many minutes, right, today. So we're going to introduce the steps as you document a current possible succession planning scenario for your own organization. So what I'd like you to do is find a sheet of paper, maybe open a notebook to a blank sheet. If you've got some loose paper around, we'll use that. So I want you to take that paper and I want you to draw a horizontal line right down the middle of that paper, just right down the middle. So you're splitting it as if you folded the paper, splitting it in half. And we're going to use this sheet to do a little bit of practicing. Are you ready to get started? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to analyze your current situation before we start getting names down. We want to know, how prepared are you? Are you ready for things like this? Well, let's see. Karine, can you go ahead and get us started?
Absolutely. On that piece of paper that Cheryl had you take out and put a horizontal line across it, we're going to have 2 scenarios. One is going to be in the top portion of that, and the second will be in the bottom portion. In the top portion of your sheet, if you would draw 1, 2, number it 1, 2, and 3 sequentially down, and in the lower portion, A, B, and C. The first scenario, once you've got that done, in scenario 1, I want you to think about a person on your team or in your organization who, if they left tomorrow, would be devastating to the organization. Think about that. Who would have that kind of impact? What would that look like, right? There's a lot of scenarios that can come into place for. Maybe they won the lottery. Maybe they found another job that you weren't expecting. There's a lot of recruiters out there doing those things. But if somebody in your organization had left, it would be devastating. That's why I want you to put in the top portion of this. In the second portion, think about another person that you know or you think might be retiring soon, and put that name in the lower portion under A. Did you find that to be easy? Were those individuals easy to identify? Most likely, we see that it is. We're identifying people that, wow, they have a huge role. They have maybe nobody else to support it, and maybe there's not a deputy or an assistant or anybody else that may be able to function in that capacity. What kind of impact would that have on the organization? What kind of signs have you looked for? So we know that the whole process of succession planning is to do it in advance, right? So the fact that we put 2 names on the piece of paper right now means they're still with the organization. So we are not behind on those 2 people today, as long as we do something about them, right? So let's move to the next one, Cheryl, and take the next polling question. And there's a number of options here. And I'd like you to really take a look at these and which of the following are signs that someone is considering leaving you think would apply. Take as many as you want. It doesn't limit you to only one. And then we'll talk a little bit about those in a minute. And you see there's a lot of factors that will come in, and we'll talk about those in more detail on the next page, and some things that might be unique to public sector that other organizations don't necessarily experience just by the nature of what the public sector services provide.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for participating in the poll. Let's see, did you get them all? Did you get all of the signs that someone might be about to leave the organization? Well, let's take a look at these if we could. One thing, excuse me, one thing we know for sure is sometimes the signs that someone's intending to leave an organization are subtle, right? They often go overlooked. They certainly don't come up and tell us now, do they? Maybe they do sometimes, but oftentimes they don't. We have to look for the signs. First, let's look at the signs that someone is maybe they're part of that 51%, right? That's looking to leave an organization. So these are the signs that someone might be at risk of turning over. If you selected all of them from the poll, you were correct. These are the things you might observe from someone who's considering leaving. We're going to use some caution, though, for sure. You may see some of these behaviors. They're not exclusively signs that they're going to leave an organization. There might be some other things happening as well. So we want to use caution as we use them. But if you see a lot of them together, I see a whole bunch of these happening with an individual, that could really be a true tell sign that someone's about to leave. Secondly, let's look at a few signs that someone might be ready to retire. Maybe they haven't told us, maybe we're not sure, maybe we think they're of a certain years of service, or maybe even age where you might think they might be contemplating something like this. These are a little bit different. And once again, we use some caution, right? It's not exclusive. Since succession planning is about being, as Corrine has already said, prepared for before someone leaves, it's important to know the signs that they might be thinking of leaving. They sometimes tell us they're about to leave, right? By the way they're acting at work, not necessarily the words they're using. So why is this important? Well, it's important because if you see these signs, it might help you prioritize, where am I going to start my succession planning? With whom, or with which role, or maybe even which individual might we want to be targeting first? So if you're seeing any of these signs, here's the message, right? If you're seeing any of these signs, especially if they're new, sudden, or more pronounced, it could be a sign that someone is considering leaving, and where a succession plan or a succession planning process might be most important. It might help maybe save some of that 51% we saw earlier, or maybe even that 29% that we might be able to save if we had some development or opportunity to move up. Corrine, do you see some different behaviors or factors in the public sector?
They see similar, but I think the focus on being interested in your benefits and your retirement plans on many other plans are structured, some plans are structured in the public sector that it doesn't benefit you to necessarily work than longer in your position. So sometimes it's not always advantageous to stay in the organization. So there are opportunities for people to retire and then still have other careers elsewhere. So those two are things to look at. But most often we see people stopping by HR to find out what the benefit plans are and what does retirement look like and what was that provision in a contract that I hadn't ever really looked at and how does that apply? And is there a good time during the year that someone should leave if they were going to optimize things? You see those typically happening and those conversations going on when people are looking to retire. Um, I would say those are the things that you usually see. And we know there's high turnover. We know that things that are taking people away from us. The competitiveness of the private versus public sector is definitely something that could impact the signs of turnover, right? We have a lot of people exiting. I mentioned it before that backlog from the delayed retirements in the pandemic certainly are going to impact those going forward. We have the fear of losing those baby boomers, right? They've gone out and that institutional knowledge is so valuable. So,
Yes.
but there are the private and public sector wages. Those are certainly things that people are considered. Public sector used to have a much better benefit plan. There were always a differentiation. So wages were maybe not as high and benefits were much better. And those may not always be the same now, where we have reduced benefits and we've increased costs for benefits to employees. Sometimes those wages may outweigh those in other organizations, and they provide opportunities for people to really leave organizations. So that certainly would have an impact on people thinking to leave in the public sector.
Wow, things are quite different, right? There's a whole lot of factors that swirl around us as we think about this. We have to keep our eye in a lot of different directions and on a lot of different behaviors in order to analyze this even more fully. With these behaviors in mind that you see on the screen there, let's analyze your specific situation. So you want to probably get your worksheet out again that you've created by drawing the line and so forth. So take out your worksheet. Considering the list of the behaviors that we saw on the other slide, do these team members that you've listed in the 1 and the A on your worksheet, do they display any of these behaviors right now? How many of these behaviors do they display? So what I'd like you to do is where you have the number 2 or you have the B at the bottom, I want you to put a number 0 to 10. How many of the behaviors that we just described do they display, if any? So it could be 0, it could be 10, or somewhere in between. You probably want me to show those behaviors again, right? So let me go back so you can see them. So I want to give you a second. Do you see any of these behaviors in these individuals at all? Go ahead and mark. I'll give you just a second to mark anywhere between 0 and 10. So I think there's about 10 on each. Well, if you marked a 0 for the individuals on your list, the risk of turnover might be, again, it's not a 1-to-1 here, but might be fairly low. If you marked 8 to 10 maybe on your list, it might indicate a chance that they might be thinking about leaving, or maybe a priority for succession planning. Insightful information. Thanks for participating. So, Corrine, what if they leave?
Ooh, that's a good question. Really, one that we need to think about. If the unexpected person left tomorrow, what would be the impact on the organization? Consider that on your spreadsheet. On the worksheet that you're looking at, jot down the things that would really be lost if that individual were to leave tomorrow, right? What is the impact on the organization, the impact on their staff, on the people? And for the public sector, what's the impact on those that we serve? Whether it be the residents, whether it be nonprofit organizations, students, we have a direct impact in those closer to we'll call them a customer, than you might see in a private sector. So perhaps you have somebody who's leading a major initiative with detailed timelines and milestone markers to meet. It's been a high profile project. What happens if they leave? What kind of impact does that have? And you see that those are things that people are going to have something to say about for sure. The other part of it is when you've identified what those types of impacts are, how long would it take to recover? How much knowledge are they taking with them when they walk out the door? We have people
Mhm.
and we have for many years in the public sector that have been there for 20, 30, we've had people even 40 years that have stayed with an
Yeah.
organization that have retained a lot of information, right? How we used to do it, what was done, when was it done? That information certainly can be valuable in key positions. Watching it walk out the door and not capturing it could be a challenge.
It's
Cheryl,
a
can you help us take a deeper dive in this area?
Absolutely. Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive. So really think about that for a minute, as Corrine said. What would be the big impacts if the person on your list that you put in the A and the one, or the one and the A, were to leave the organization? Did you think of any of these, for example? Here's a typical list of impacts to organizations when there's turnover, especially when the turnover is unexpected. Did you think about these? Did you think about many of these, all of these? As Corrine said, often people think about the loss of critical skills and knowledge first, and sometimes only, right? That 30 or 40-year employee, for example, that Corrine refers to, leaving out the door with all of that organizational knowledge, really is a huge impact. But not about often the potential of the impact on the people, right? The remaining team members, the folks around them, even the constituents themselves, from relationships to stress. There can be huge impact on the folks around them. So considering the individuals on your worksheet, for example, if they left tomorrow, which impacts would you experience most? Any on the list at all? Any maybe that Corrine indicated? You could jot that on the side of your numbering if you'd like. So proactive succession planning can help reduce this disruption, right, in the chaos during this transition caused by turnover, especially when it's unexpected. So there is a positive organizational benefit when we are proactive and we do focus our attentions on succession planning. Isn't there, really? Corrine, what additional impacts do you see in the public sector?
I think I'd elaborate on one of them here, and that is really the relationship with constituents. A lot of what we do in public sector are built on relationships. They're built on providing services to our residents or to our students, and losing people walking out the door abruptly without a plan makes it difficult to pivot. And not only that, but if there are projects or things that get behind or delayed, or unlike a vehicle, if somebody were to walk off the job on a vehicle and in a company, a large organization, and they didn't do something in a timely fashion, you're never going to see that in the car that you bought on the lot. But
Mhm.
in your backyard, when you want to be able to go out and enjoy a park or drive on beautiful roads, because we have a 3-month season, maybe a 4-month season to construct our
Yeah.
roads, right? We want to see that it got done. We don't get to pivot that, right? We get 4 beautiful months of good weather in Michigan, although we've had a few years where we've gotten more construction done. Um, but those can have significant impacts for not only today, but for the next year, and even in plans beyond that. In the public sector, people are vocal, so you're going to hear about it. It doesn't just impact your department; it will then impact the city council. It can impact all kinds of things that inherently will happen when those balls drop, and there might be a lag or a missing piece in that process. So recovering from that's going to be important, like making sure you have a plan in place. So maybe we start taking a look at how long would it take to recover. Those are really impactful. If somebody leaves, it's going to be important for you to figure out how long is it going to take, and is it worth planning ahead of time rather than waiting for that. Consider the impact. One of these, if it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, greater than 5 years, some would have such a value of information that if they walked out, it would take you a lot of time to be able to put that down into and capitalize on it when it's gone, right? How long would it take if someone left tomorrow? Think about that. That's really what you're going to talk about and think through. Is it really worth what you see typically is going to be that it likely will take less time to put together a succession plan than it will
Yes.
to um, to recoup from someone leaving without that knowledge captured or having somebody ready to pivot into the position. So it really can make a big difference.
Oh, it makes a huge difference, Kareen. I mean, it could be days, weeks, months, it could be years even to recover, to get someone up to speed or to reconfigure, as you're describing, some of the workaround and constraints, especially in the public sector. It can take a whole long time. So
And
let's
Cheryl,
get back. Go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, and Cheryl, there are people in in organizations that have such great skill sets and really relationships that when they leave, building that back up really can take an incredible amount of time. And with it comes the scrutiny of whether or not the next guy coming in will be good as Joe was, right?
Yes.
And so there is that process of making sure we're prepared and you can get people in there and have a smoother transition so that you don't feel that impact because everybody feels it when there's somebody just not aligned. So certainly impactful.
Oh, significantly. Thanks for those examples. Those are fantastic. Getting back to our four-step process. So after selecting your critical roles, the names that you put in number one and letter A, it's time to focus on who our successors might be. Have you thought about who might be able to take over if that person were to leave? Do you have any people identified at all? Did you ever even think about having anyone identified? How prepared are you for that potential turnover? Well, let's find out. Let's find out through a poll. So in the next poll, consider the people on your list. I want you to consider the people on your list, and like I said, the one and the A. If they were to unexpectedly depart today or tomorrow, how prepared is someone to take over? In this poll, what I'd like you to do is choose the best option that represents your preparedness. I want you to choose only one this time. Choose one that represents, are you fully prepared? Do you have someone identified? Have you thought about it at all? Haven't even thought about it? Where are you with your thinking and preparedness with having someone ready? Thanks for participating. It looks like many of you have a varying level of participation or preparedness for someone to take over. What about the public sector, Kareen? Do you find that they are generally more prepared, less prepared, differently prepared? What do you see?
I think if you go back to the slide we talked about earlier in, we had what 12% of the people that were prepared with plans.
Yes.
88% who are not. That's a scary
Mm-hmm.
number. And I would say a vast majority of public sector do not have formal plans, and certainly probably don't look at them as living documents either, right? If they did have one, it's probably they checked the box and they might have put it on the shelf, but making sure that that continuity is there might not be either. And I think you find that there's limited resources and challenges that you might face that you wouldn't otherwise face in inflexible civil service systems. You have union contracts that might not allow flexibility, political transitions, and shifting priorities, all having great impacts on what is happening. So it can help shift where the priorities are and where we might have started down that road, but we just found a different priority today. So that can happen in any job, but I think you can see if we don't dedicate the time and the resources and make it a priority for the organization, in any case, we don't get those things done, do we?
No, that's for sure. That's for
So
sure.
let's finish documenting the current situation. Your paper being brought back out, we're going to go on to number 3 or C, depending on which scenario you wanted to use, and place the name. You've had a little bit of time and maybe you don't have it identified, but we really want you to think about this. What's the name of a person you think would best be able to take over? in the event of an unexpected departure? Is there someone that comes to mind? Think about who you might put in there. And then further, what were the attributes that you considered? What makes them the best candidate? Take over? And why should someone select them over anybody else? For anybody trying to find and fill positions, we know that picking the right person is essential in any situation. But in this situation, it helps make the transition less chaotic, a little bit smoother, and so much more easy, I guess you will, if you have that in place. So let's explore some pitfalls, which sometimes make selecting successors a challenge. And maybe align with what you chose, maybe they didn't. The pitfalls that we see in selecting the successors, there are a lot of times that people will make the first mistake, right? We pick the person who's second in line. Great, they should know it. They have everything in place. We make that assumption that they're the best candidate. Choosing them on some of these criteria, basically, someone who continually asks for a raise, or maybe it's the highest paid individual, or maybe the person who's been here the longest. Yes, they're the ones who have all the information, right? Are they? But are they the right person for the next step in this position, right? And maybe talking to their manager. But what about choosing successors based on other factors, not just the non-performance oriented factors? What about other results? Automatically choosing someone based on these roles, the squeaky wheel, the person who's provided, the longest term commitment to the organization, may not always be the right person. Cheryl, for example, I had an organization that I worked with, and they did a great job of succession planning.
Yeah.
The CEO was prepared. They were going to leave. They knew they were exiting in about 4 years. So they identified their assistant as the heir apparent, right?
Yes.
They made sure they introduced them to things that they wouldn't have otherwise been introduced them to. They gave them more responsibility. They let them in on areas that they might not have been involved in before. And when that CEO decided to leave, so did the individual. The individual, we forgot to ask, like, is this where they wanted to go, right? They were willing to serve in this elevated capacity with that leader in place, but when that leader left, they weren't interested in the position. And that can happen for many reasons, right?
All the time.
That next position may hold a requirement or a skill set that people just don't have. So
Yeah.
it's important to look at what we see in those types of criteria.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, don't just automatically pick someone random or for these reasons. I want you to look at your list of successors that you put. Did you select them for any of these reasons? Were these some of the reasons that you picked for yours? So, Karine, if these aren't the main reasons for selecting a successor, what should we be considering when selecting a successor then?
I think there are a number of factors that are far more important. One thing that gets overlooked is someone who has a career interest and a willingness to learn. You can have a lot of skill sets in your toolbox, but if you don't have that part of it, it makes it very difficult to get them to make that transition, right? I've always said this, I would take somebody who is passionate, eager, and willing to learn and help mentor them and grow them into positions that they have an interest in. Because they're not ones you're trying to pull behind to get them there. You really want someone who's interested in those next steps in the organization, and they're willing to put in the work. Do you know how in your organization has communicated interest in developing in certain areas? Question is do you ask employees what their future and career development plans are? Sometimes during a performance evaluation, we get that opportunity, right? But it is inherent in many organizations in the public sector that we don't have performance evaluations. We found ways around that by creating development plans, which are great. It's a great interactive conversation between employees and their supervisors that allow you to have those conversations. So you might have information like that you can draw from. But you really are looking for an engaged employee who has an interest and a willingness. They're going to be your most committed, and make your life much easier in looking and identifying somebody like that. Um, and don't worry that they don't have every skill set, and you don't expect them to have all those skill sets. We want them to grow and learn and come along this journey. It's their next step in the organization. So bringing them along and giving them that opportunity to go on this adventure with you is a great way to keep them engaged, right? And we find that in the generation today, that's really important. They want that engagement. They want to be connected. They want what's on the next step of the career path. And we don't always do a great job of that in the public sector of creating those career paths. So think about that and think about ensuring that people know where they can grow in the organization.
That's right. And not just even in the public sector, but across the board. Gallup would say, well, one of the number one reasons why people aren't engaged, for those people who are not engaged at work, is because their perception of lack of a future in the organization, lack of development, lack of a career. They don't see themselves further ahead. It's also one of the main reasons for turnover for our younger generation, as you alluded to here, that if they don't have someone helping them develop and create a career plan, or even talk to them, even the act of having the conversation can actually engage someone and get them moving in that direction. And we often make that mistake, as you said. We don't do as good of a job, I guess, at engaging people in these kinds of conversations. So once you've identified someone you think might be the great successor, we have to prepare them, right? We're getting back to the process now. So how do you prepare them? Well, the preparation includes two things. It's a little analysis and it's a little math. So let's take a look at how we can prepare our successors. And as Corrine said, don't pick a successor simply because they have all the skills or they don't. We develop the successor. They can come without the skills. We're going to put the work in and prepare them. So your job then is to evaluate their readiness and their skills. Preparing a successor with development is a simple math formula. You see it listed here if you can pick up on the math formula piece. First, you make a list of the critical skills required for that role. Where do you get those critical skills? Well, you might look at the current incumbent, have an interview with the current incumbent, maybe. Maybe you have a job description or other profile. Maybe you have performance review or goal setting documents. The focus, though, here is not to make a laundry list of 250 things. Maybe, that's unlikely, but the goal is really to focus on the most essential and critical skills to do the job well. What are you afraid to lose, say, if someone were to walk out the door? So that's number one. So we start with that first box. Then we minus or subtract or remove skills that they do possess already. So we take those off the list. Maybe we mark them off. And the remaining list of skills are the skills that we need developing. That sounds so simple, right? Right? Oh, not so fast, Cheryl. Not so fast. I get the math part, but it's not so fast. The hardest part, maybe, that you might think is identifying the level of skills that potential successor currently has, especially if you haven't had direct observation of them or you don't interact with them on a regular basis. You have to depend on other sources of information and people to help make those determinations, like some of these areas. So you might want to look at, as Corrine said, you might want to look at performance review conversations to see what they have. You might want to talk to the current manager of that individual who might work directly with them, or others who might look directly with them. Any kind of metrics, performance-oriented metrics that are captured or looked at could be ways to identify, do they have the skills? Don't they have the skills? So we can get to a clean skills need developing list. That's the end product of our mathematics. Corrine, are there additional ways in the public sector that they can help identify skills?
I think observation is one that's high, right? So in the public sector, with a lot of positions, they can be very front facing. They can have opportunities to lead in different situations. And how about their involvement in organizations and in participation throughout the organization? You will see employees have lots of opportunities to show their commitment, their pride, their enthusiasm for a lot of programs that are going on. Do they show up? Are they involved? Are they engaged? Or they just come to work to get their paycheck? Those are things that you can visibly see. Who are the people who are showing up? Who are showing up and acting like a leader? Are they trusted internally or externally? And how are they about building those relationships and working with a wide variety of people? So there's a lot of opportunities I think that you can see what people are doing that you might not otherwise, that you aren't going to see just sitting behind the desk, that are important to consider.
Awesome. Fantastic.
So what about your successors? What skills do they have? Have you taken a look at those? So look at the individuals on your list. We're going to ask you to do your analysis. And in that, what skills do they have? What don't they have? And what needs to be developed? We don't have the time to go through all of that today, but we'd ask that you take this formula and think about the people you've identified today, because it's a first step, and walk through analyzing where they are and what you need to do to get to somebody in the future, right? Spend time after this webinar and go through that analysis. It'll start you on your way, at least get your mind thinking about what we need to do in your organization in order to prepare for the future.
Awesome. And once that skill gap is identified, that list of skills to develop, once you've done the math and the analysis, there, a development plan can be created to help get that person up to speed and ready to take over. Let's take a look at a few essentials of creating development plans. It's going to give you a little taste of how to create a good development plan. But before we do that, I want to hear from you. Before I share those, let's take another poll. I want to know from you what you think the best methods of developing successors are. What do you think? What kinds of development methods do you think are best? What methods to close the gap? So what I'd like you to do on this poll is you can select whichever one you think is the best one that might be used to develop successors. I'll give you just a second to respond to that. Think about it. If you can select more than one, I would do that, or select all that apply if it's available to you. I'll give you just a second to take a look at that. As you see, there's a lot of different ways that that you can use to develop folks, and there's never a one-size-fits-all. Corrine, what are some specific methods maybe that the public sector uses for development?
So I think there's a couple of things that are unique. I think that obviously I talked a little bit about development plans before, sitting and having those development plans, providing stretch assignments for individuals, giving them something more and that is maybe a little bit outside of their reach with the guidance and the mentorship and helping them succeed. Cross training, we all love cross training. I think that in any organization, it doesn't matter the position. And I think it really depends on the position as to what skills you might need to help develop in an individual. So for example, say it's a department head in a city or a township or a village, having an exposure to boards or commissions or the city council is important. Most often they may see it from the back seat. They may see it on a rewind of what happened in a board meeting, but giving them an opportunity to maybe be in front of a council or a board, giving them the opportunity to learn how to even prepare, how to answer questions. Those are things that take time and mentorship to really get into a place to do that. And not everybody loves public speaking. Not everybody loves standing before a board or a commission. So if that's part of the job and we can't develop that skill, we might be in trouble.
That's right. That's right. And that's the beauty of the public sector, just by definition, right? That things are public. And so it gives you a whole big bunch, I suppose, of content that you can draw from, because things are documented, things are recorded, everything's available. And so drawing some of those resources into your development planning, especially in the public sector, can be fantastic. It can be great resources. Again, trying to create succession planning with things you already have at your fingertips, things that are already available to you. And so I think we could agree maybe that a combination of methods might be the best approach. Well, let's take a look at some ways to think about development. You probably have seen images like this before. You've probably seen an image just like this with the 70-20-10. While classroom experiences, for example, are an important part of formal learning, most skill development, as you can see from this graphic, occurs on the job and with others and with the guidance of others. So oftentimes when you're thinking about, I got to develop someone's skills, I should send them to a class. What classes do you have? I get that question quite often. I work in development quite often. The classroom isn't always the best place, because when developing the skills of successors, consider a best practice being a blended approach of all of the categories. And the good news is, as Corrine noted, and as I said, you already have a lot of these resources at your disposal. The main goal here is to connect someone who needs the skill with someone who has the skill. You're just putting the sort of those two heads together. And you can do that in a formal way. You can do that in an informal way. You can do that over social conversations, because we're trying to get this information into the head of that information. What's a frequent question, Corrine, that we have sometimes about successor development?
Yes, when you talk about that connection about the two, I think the biggest concern people have is capturing the organizational knowledge. How are we going to make sure that we capture that when the person walks out the door, right? We're going to go over these fairly briefly. You'll have the deck slide when you're done. But there are a number of ways you can do it. Mentoring, of course, job shadowing, lunch and learns, internal videos and webinars, and other things like documenting your SOPs, mentoring, internal management systems that you may have and making sure that they're up to speed, creating a plan for pre-transitions for those that are retiring, right? We have opportunities. We really know like how long people have been in an organization. We can think about what are some of those things that we'd like to capture. And do you have a plan for someone who leaves? Are there a transition plan for someone who exits the organization? You get to grab that and make sure that that's timed into your outline when you're trying to grab the information. But really connecting the people and documenting it and making sure that you have the essential knowledge you need as people leave. It's important to do that. I think leading organizations make mentoring and job shadowing and cross training an ongoing initiative. It keeps people engaged, it keeps them working through and it keeps that knowledge active and relevant, not just captured and nobody's using it. So that's why that partnership and the people connection is so important. And I always like the documented of SOPs. If someone's going to teach me something that's not written down, great way to learn it if you're teaching somebody. Document it, make sure it works. So even if the person doesn't have time to document it, the individual who's learning certainly can. It's a great learning tool. We've talked about that before, Cheryl. It certainly makes things easier on the individual who has to go back and redo something they might not have done very frequently.
Holy cow. You're right. Yeah. And looking at this list here, all of you can do this tomorrow. You can do all of these things today. You don't need a fancy $1 million systems and sophisticated tools. You can set up mentoring partnerships. You can set up job shadowing. You just have to, again, identify the person who has the skills and the person who needs the skills together. And we give you a little bit of parameter here for you to help you with some of those things. So let's review a little bit about what we talked about today as it relates to succession planning. Here's your checklist at the end. So here's your checklist. The big message today, I think, if you picked up on it, is get started now. Don't wait. Don't wait for someone to turn over. Don't wait for all the retirements to occur, as we saw in the data. Reduce the chaos that can be associated with staff departure and transition by being proactive. Think about it. Set it up today. Get others involved. You know, it's development for other people. You know, if you can get them involved, establish a committee, a steering committee for succession planning. Guess what? That's development in itself, and that can be very helpful. You're going to want to discuss succession planning with your leadership team, with your managers. Get them on board. It sometimes falls to the manager, right, to have some of those career conversations or development conversations, or even to secure on-the-job training kinds of things by offering time and resources to their team members. So it's really important to get your managers involved, get your managers trained. You're going to start with your critical roles. maybe the ones that are showing signs of turning over more, maybe those that would devastate. They have the strongest organizational knowledge that you're afraid are going to walk out the door tomorrow. Maybe a certain level within your organization. Don't get overwhelmed and think you got to do 55 positions tomorrow. Start by prioritizing those. Inventory your development resources, even your performance evaluation tools. Are you capturing good metrics? Do you have books and articles and people and training available to you in the public sector? What about all those recordings and documentation elements that Corrine refers to? Those would be fantastic. And so the most important messages for today really are: be proactive, use the tools and resources you already have. If you'd like to invest in other kinds of tools, there's plenty of them available. Your people are your most important asset here to help you with this and get started today. So thank you so much. I've got a couple more things we want to share before we leave, but I want to thank you for allowing us to share our knowledge today. And we look forward for sure to connecting with you in future events with us. For those of you who are looking for your credits and the codes associated with the SHRM activity or HRCI credits, you'll find those codes right here, and feel free to jot those down as we go. And Ashley, I think, is going to wrap us up today with a few announcements at the end. So stay with us for the next minute or so. And I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I look forward to connecting with you. Hey, if you ever want to chat about succession planning or development, I'm always available. I love the topic, as you might be able to tell. And I'd love to talk to you about any of these kinds of things. I love to brainstorm with folks. So thank you so much. Ashley, on to you.
This concludes today's program. Thank you for joining us. As a reminder, Raymond's public sector team hosts quarterly webinars like this one, and you can register for the remainder of the 2025 series now. With respect to people's time, we will be reaching out directly to answer all the questions submitted. If you would like to learn more, please visit Raymond's website at www.raymond.com. You can also email us at publicsector@raymond.com. Thank you and have a great rest of the day.